Hello, everybody. Hey
Hello.
there. Okay, we're here today for the masterclass Servant Leadership for Sales Ops. Of course, before we start, always like to kick things off with a quick icebreaker. Would love chat participation with this as well. Pete, what's a favorite meal you've had recently?
Mm, should I put it in the chat or should I do it live? I think so. I've been doing a bunch. So I try to do quarterly dinners with my sales team, kind of individually. It's like kind of like a professional development slash like morale thing with reps on my team. And so I've been having a lot of dinners recently. And so what I've been targeting when I take them out is salads. So I don't know if it's like my favorite meal per se, but it's an important sales management behavior to have, to do quarterly, I believe, to do quarterly dinners individually with folks. And so unfortunately, that kind of like, you know, that can, that can be a little hard on you and like, your physique. So you got to, keep it low cal. So that's kind of been my favorite move recently. What about you?
I'm on the complete opposite side of the spectrum.
Oh God.
Yeah, a Wendy's Baconator. Oh that's my Achilles heel right there. I don't know what they put in their sauce. Yeah, I can't resist, man.
Nice, man. I love it.
Okay, so it does seem we do have a few more folks who are going to kick things off now. Of course, we're here today for the Masterclass Servant Leadership for Sales Ops, empowering modern sales orgs with data. Super excited about the content and takeaways everyone's going to be getting out of this event. Of course, today's event is brought to you by the team here at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you're going to be invited to join after this event. Before we dive in, do you want to cover some housekeeping notes? First of all, this event is being recorded. You're going to be able to access this recording and the key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if there's any questions for our speaker today, please use the Q&A function, and they're going to do their best to get to it during the event. All right, going to hand things over to you, Pete, to talk about Atrium and to introduce yourself.
Sure, man. Thank you. I think I'm gonna share my screen directly here so I can mouse around while we're doing this prezo. There we go. Cool. Yeah. So, hey, folks. Pete Kazanji here. Atrium is sponsoring today's event, and so for those of you who may not be familiar, Atrium makes what we call data-driven sales management software, and so this is software that helps sales managers and sales leaders, sales teams use data to improve rep performance. And so what Atrium does is continuously monitor dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs and proactively alert managers and leaders and ops when something is off with your reps, your teams, and so on. And so what this means is that managers can get to coaching insights faster and drive positive behavior change and win. Right. So it's all about making folks better. And a great thing about all of this is it takes about 2 minutes to set up a free Atrium account via a read-only connection to your Salesforce account. So it's pretty cool in that regard. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about me, and why it might be interesting to listen to what I have to say about servant leadership, sales operations, and data-driven sales management is. As noted, I'm one of the founders and the CRO at Atrium here. I'm responsible for our go-to-market function. But prior to Atrium, I started a software company called TalentBin that was a recruiting software company. It was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and that's really where I went from being kind of like a business generalist founder to being our first seller, first sales manager, first sales leader, et cetera, et cetera. And went from having a single single salesperson in the organization, me, to a 20-person sales organization when we were acquired by Monster, and then was subsequently responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide for a 500-person sales organization. So kind of like run the gamut there. Subsequent to that, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then also started this little community called Modern Sales Pros. So that's a little bit about me. We are doing an offer here today. If you'd like to get one of these handy dandy sales nerd hoodies that our customers really love so much, and a couple of data driven desk references, data driven sales management desk reference laminates, we're going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat here. So you can just go ahead and sign up for that. You'll just have to put in your size there, etc. And all we ask in exchange for that is a quick chat on how you are doing data-driven sales management at your current organization right now. So you can go ahead and sign up for that. We're going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat there for you. Wonderful. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about how, maybe framing a little bit about how you should think about your job as a sales ops pro, specifically as relates to serving managers and leaders that you work with. Also, how you can use data and metrics to do that. Right, it's kind of one way of doing that. And then we're going to talk about what those might be, what those data assets might be, in order to help your organization, in order to better serve your organization. So that would be things like, the metrics that leaders need in order to manage the business, the metrics that managers need in order to lead the reps effectively, and the metrics that folks need in order to monitor at the rep level. So that's going to be that. So really, the first thing I would challenge sales operations folks or sales operators out there to kind of think about is that, in the sales ops business, we are in the business of leverage, right? We are constantly looking for areas to provide more leverage to the business, whether that's through automation, or systematization, or like devolving processes and kind of like capabilities to other folks, kind of like empowering other folks. But like, we are in the business of leverage. We are not in the business of like doing the same thing again and again and again and again, in kind of like low leverage ways. And so then the second thing that I would kind of help folks, challenge folks to think about is like, not only are we in the business of leverage, but a very, very important thing that we are in the business of levering is our managers and leaders that we work with. We are in the business of levering them up and providing, because we're an internal provider, right, to lever those folks up, such that they can be very effective at empowering their reps, their staff, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is really the thing, like, this is where the concept of servant leadership, sales operations comes from, is like, we are in the business of levering those folks up such that they can be more effective. And then the way that we want to do that, and this can be tough, is being proactive about that, and not reactive about that. And so I think that one of the things that we can all really identify with here is the notion of like being asked to like play fetch, right? And kind of run off and like, hey, I really need, I need this validation rule. I really need this new field. I need this report. I need this dashboard, et cetera. So like, it can very much feel like, all right, ready, go fetch, boy. Right? And so instead, what we should be doing is we should be like kind of thinking ahead to how we can empower folks with the things that we know that they're going to need. Right. So rather than them kind of coming to us and be like, I think I need this thing. I think I need this thing. Instead, our approach should be, hey, I know that you're going to need this. right? Like it's highly likely that you're going to need this. And so what we have done is we have provided you with this asset or these set of assets or what have you, right? Because like essentially tools, like I have made you this tool, I've made you this resource that can be embedded into your operating rhythm there. And so and one of the best ways to be able to do this to empower managers and leaders is through better data and metrics to manage their teams. And so that's kind of like the argument that I'd like to present to folks is that if we are in the business of leverage, and if we are in the business of leverage in order to empower our managers, what we should be doing, and leaders, we should be doing that in a proactive fashion, to equip them to better manage their teams, and lead by metric, because that is it's an extraordinarily high leverage way of or an extraordinarily high leverage approach to achieving that goal there. And so the reason why it's powerful to use data to enable leaders and managers is multifaceted, but these are a couple examples as to why that ends up being important. Is because one, as we all kind of know in sales operations, kind of having a bent, like more of a little bit like more data bent, more analytical bent, data can be the eyes and ears of the organization to see around corners and not be surprised. Like, oh, wow, that's weird. Win rates are deteriorating in the second half of 2022. That's kind of weird. I wonder what's going on. As an example, I don't know if that resonates with anyone. Right? So like being able to see around corners and then adjust. But the thing here is like that really can't be centralized in the sales operations or data function. It really has to be devolved to management and leadership, because if you can instill a data-driven approach throughout the business at all levels, right, like leadership, C-suite, like C-suite board meetings, right, leadership, second level leadership, but also at the management level, well, what that does is it drives high performance management who drive results, right? So rather than it being centralized, you're providing that data down at the kind of like closer to the hard deck, if you will, right, where the rubber hits the road. And so like really this is the future of modern sales management. There's a master class I do on sales Moneyball moment where kind of analogize the analytics revolution in in professional athletics, of course, like well encapsulated by the movie Moneyball and the book Moneyball by Michael Lewis. Really, there's like a big shift going on where the future of modern sales management really is super, very data driven, and so like it's just a required capability. It's a required capability for managers, you're seeing this in organizations where manager enablement, rather like it can't be the realm of sales operations to be like the keeper of data and the interpreter and the magic wizards or whatever. Like they have to be in the business of providing that to managers who can then use it themselves on a day-by-day basis, because having that single threaded through the sales operations function is just not it's not leveraged, right? It's not leveraged at all, like we were talking about. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 different ways for weaving data into a modern sales management motion. We're going to talk about metrics for the modern sales leader. That's kind of like VP, CRO, board level. I did a recent master class on data-driven board meetings that you can check out too. Kind of goes into more in depth in there. Maybe we can drop the link for that. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about metrics for the managers that sales operations serve. And then we're going to talk about metrics for the reps that are led. So first, let's talk about metrics for the leaders themselves. And we're kind of going to break things out here. So these are just going to be a set of metrics that you should maybe consider would be useful for having in your leadership operating rhythm, right? So you've got your VP of sales, your CRO, maybe you're like senior director of SDR, et cetera. What are the things that those folks need to be empowered with so that they can, consume these on an ongoing basis and kind of see around corners, et cetera? And so really the way that I kind of like to break those out is what I call line of sight revenue. So essentially like, hey, here's what's coming right now. Revenue next. It's like, hey, what's coming up next? Rep productivity, or what we like to call the fingerprint of success, right? So these are about averages. These are not about totals. These things right here are about totals. These things right here are about averages. And some other kind of examples there. So cool. Let's talk about that a little bit. So, the metrics for leaders, kind of the first thing you're going to be looking at there are going to be lots of totals, right? So like new opportunity inflow, total pipeline ownership, new pipeline ownership, and obviously like lagging indicators like wins and bookings. Like these are things that folks, and these are all like screenshots from Atrium, Atrium's library of like hundreds of kind of pre-baked metrics there. But like these are the things that leaders kind of care about. Like what is the line of sight there? The next thing is kind of like forecasting, right? And that would be, hey, looking forward, just on a raw basis, maybe looking at our pipeline by close date. What does the pipeline look like for this month, the next month, the next month, the next month after that? Maybe split by forecast category. Maybe it's, depending on your sales motion, maybe it's for 12 months split by quarter, et cetera. And then also doing the same thing on a rep basis, right? What does it look like for your reps there as well? So essentially like this kind of basic kind of forecasting stuff is something that you'd want to be paying attention to there. The next step there is going to be what I would call kind of like more advanced forecasting, or kind of making judgments about things. And so a great example of that would be kind of advanced, like what we like to call win rate weighted pipeline. So it's essentially like how much pipe has, how much pipe is in this quarter, next quarter, the quarter after that, discounted by the level of not instead of like an arbitrarily created probability that like someone just like licked their finger and kind of like assigned to different stages, but instead discounted by the win rate, right? The historical win rate for that stage, but importantly on a rep by rep basis. A lot of organizations do this manually. They'll like do a discounted, they'll do a probability based win rate based or like pipeline that's been weighted based on win rate for a segment. Kind of do that manually based on a historical win rate from different stages. One of the things that we like to do here at Atrium, we built this, is just do that on a per rep basis, because different reps have different win rates from different stages. And then the next thing that you would want to look at there is kind of pipeline change in a quarter, right? So, how much, what did you kind of enter what did you enter the quarter looking like from a pipeline standpoint? And then kind of like what has played out over time there. So these are kind of some examples of things that you might like want to check out there that like would be very powerful for what we call line of sight revenue for that kind of leadership. You can also do kind of anomaly detection on this as well. So like kind of line of like alerting anomaly detection on line of sight revenue can be very helpful. But I mean, I guess like you're kind of like bird dogging that pretty heavily from a visual standpoint. So this can be nice, but maybe because you're bird dogging this so hard, it's a little bit less important. So then what we want to talk about is what we call like revenue next. So this is stuff that's like line of sight, where new opportunity inflow, or kind of like forward looking pipe, or win rate weighted pipe. Well, what about the stuff that's going to come in the next quarter or the quarter after that? And that would be things like new opportunity inflow, right? Because depending on your sales cycle, obviously like it's not like total opportunity ownership, right? Because like that's just going to build over time. But instead, what that might be is like the total number of new opportunities that are coming into your team's pipe on an interval by interval basis there. The other thing, a more advanced version of this as well, because an op isn't an op, but as pipeline advances, on a stage by stage basis, it becomes more real, if you will. Hopefully, if you have good entry and exit criteria, it should become more real. And so a great way of measuring that is not just to look at like total pipeline build, but also look at the amount of pipeline that's making it to a certain stage or beyond. So in this case right here, this is a screenshot of an organization. This is an example of an organization whose pipeline is reaching needs analysis on an ongoing basis, right? So the thing there is what you'd want to do is track pipeline that's reaching those incremental stages, right? The next thing you might want to focus in on is concepts around revenue next and SDR leading indicators, right? So because pipeline creation and pipeline advancement is, that is a leading indicator to revenue, but the leading indicator to pipeline creation is going to be that SDR behavior. And of course, even beyond that would be marketing behavior as well. That's kind of beyond the purview of what we're going to talk about right here. But looking at leading indicators in the SDR team, like aggregate number of SDR net new accounts being touched, aggregate numbers of total accounts that are being touched. All of those would be great leading indicators. So if you're doing a good job of engaging new accounts, engaging new contacts in the SDR team, well, provided that your email responsiveness rate, your connect rates, et cetera, persist there, like we would anticipate that would turn into opportunity ownership, right? And so this is why this stuff right here, like is like an important thing for doing from a looking at revenue next standpoint. So then the next thing is, and these are all totals right here. So lots of totals here, important to pay attention to. It's great. The next thing that really ends up being important is what we like to refer to here at Atrium as the fingerprint of success. And essentially what this is using metrics to help us understand what our benchmarks should be on a rep by rep basis, such that we can like understand, is somebody being healthy, like is our average rep being healthy, and then also compare our individual reps to that benchmark. And so this is where like averages end up being really important. And you might do this on a per segment basis, et cetera. And so like a good example here would be like, it's one thing to look at total new opportunity ownership, which we were talking about earlier, but what about per rep, right? On a per rep basis, what does our new opportunity inflow or our new pipeline creation look like? Like maybe it's on a month by month basis, maybe it's on a week by week basis if you're looking across like a much larger group of folks. So in this organization right here, what you can see is this team in general says, hey, we want to anticipate that our reps have anywhere between 20 to 40 new opportunities flowing into them on a per AE, or sorry, on a per AE basis. And like, is that actually happening? And then looking at how many are actually in their pipes right now. Excuse me, this is not inflow, this is like totality. Like, hey, we have an expectation that our reps own at anywhere between 20 to 40 ops at a given point in time. And then how's that breaking out? Like these guys right here are like a little bit overloaded, these guys right here are a little bit lighter there, as an example, right? So then so like this is just opportunity ownership, but you can extend that concept to pretty much any other metric as well. So for instance, new business win rate, right? Like how are we doing on our new business win rate? Well, this is like what the average is on a quarter by quarter basis across all these reps. Great, this is our average, this is our fingerprint of success. Okay, cool. How does that split out here? We have some folks who are outperforming, we have other folks that are a little bit lower here. Obviously this right here is this would be the provenance of what would then drive data-driven coaching behavior here, where we'd say, hey, like this is what we would expect. This is not where it needs to be. And then we can kind of coach on this. A little bit more about this in a second as relates to providing this information to managers so that they can drive action on that. And then this can go all the way down to very very kind of tactical levels, like customer facing meeting volume. We expect that our reps should, as an example, we expect that our reps should be having anywhere between 50 to 70 customer facing meetings per month, right? And then just doing the same thing, right? Like these guys right here seem like a little bit higher than they should be. These folks down here really seem like they're kind of bringing up the rear, right? But like by having these resources, like these concepts of the fingerprint of success, that as a leader, like looking across my entire organization, whether that's 10 AEs or 30 AEs or 50 AEs or 100 AEs or what have you, kind of broken out, this will allow us to understand, hey, how's that trending over time? Do we have do we have an AE utilization problem that has manifested as indicated by a decline in customer facing meeting volume? Like, has that shifted as compared to previously? If that's the case, we would want to address that. And the mechanism by which you would do that is by looking at a fingerprint of success here, kind of see how that average is trending, right? Do the same with ASP. So that's fingerprint of success stuff there, which can oftentimes be missed when folks are really just kind of focused on totals, and kind of like miss the opportunity for saying how is the average trending, how's our efficiency trending, especially when you're adding more reps. Like if you're adding more and more and more reps, your totals might be going up, even though your averages might be going down. Like a little counterintuitive there, but like you might be adding more and more reps, but they would be less and less and less efficient, right? Cool. And then the last thing I want to kind of talk about is what we talk about early warning indicators and kind of like early warning indicators and anomaly detection here at Atrium, because it's something that like we've spent a lot of engineering resources doing. But importantly, what you want to do is like having these resources in place is great. The downside associated with them is that you have to, make a promise that what you're going to do is use your eyeballs to measure these things on a recurring basis, which we're all human, and so it's easy to miss things. And so by having kind of early warning indicator and anomaly detection in place, that can help leaders and whether it's a manager level or leadership level, understand where trends are showing up to the good or to the bad. So as an example, this team right here has a higher average selling price than they had historically. This would be an example of something that like we'd love to be aware of proactively versus having to like go and like sniff things out. Or new pipeline ownership, right? Like, hey, turns out on a month by month basis, this team has less new pipeline coming into their pipe than they historically have had. This would be an example of a really good thing for us to bird dog. We'd rather know about this up front than be caught flat-footed here, right? Like look at this at the end of a time interval or what have you, right? So that's kind of that. And of course you can do this for board meetings and QBRs as well. Maybe what actually Elliot already did dropped a link in there on data-driven board meetings, so that's fantastic. Cool. So then the next thing we're going to talk about here is kind of this notion of metrics for the managers that sales operations serves, right? And so that's kind of like this thing right here. Like, what do we need to be doing to equip the sales managers, right, who are kind of like the feet on the street, if you will? What do we need to do in order to equip them to more successfully manage by metrics and to more successfully use to infuse data in their sales management motion? And so first we'll kind of go through a couple different topics here. Like one, a little kind of like disquisition on like why managers matter and should be using data, and as an extension, why sales operations should be empowering them. Then we'll talk about like data-driven operating rhythms, data-driven one-on-ones, then managing with goals. And so the first thing here is one thing that I would advance to you all is that sales managers, so like frontline managers, right? So AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers are extremely important in in sales, in high performing sales organizations. And the reason why is because again, they're a form of leverage. Like any given sales leader can't manage 30 reps or 50 reps or whatever. And any sales operations person who's, maybe diving into the data or whatever and trying to analyze what's going on with like 30 different reps or 100 different reps or whatever, there's no way that you're going to be able to do that. And so if instead what we can do is we can empower our managers to be more effective, what they'll be able to do is the biggest kind of impact is that they take middle performers and they make them, not like super top performers, but they just cheat everybody up, just cheat everybody one step to the right on the bell curve. And you can kind of see this in Gartner's research, where high performing managers are the ones that drive top performers. They drive higher top performers. Excuse me, they drive more top performers. You don't take your top performers and be like, all right, like you're already 120% over quota and we're going to make you 140. It's pretty hard to do given the fact that everybody has 40 or 50 hours in a week. But if you have 8 reps that report to you, right, or 6 reps that report to you, and 3 of them previously were at like 70% to quota and you get them to like 80, right? That's going to be the source of leverage. That's going to be a lot. That's going to be the difference there. And so the problem is that the mechanism by which to do this, there's actually a bunch of different things that sales managers need to spend their time doing. Most sales managers are pretty good at deal inspection and strategy. You don't really have to remind a lot of AE managers to to talk deals with their reps. It's usually they come from AE like an AE background, so it's like second nature. But what you do have to remind them to do is more kind of data-driven behavior. So like track progress towards goals and not just output goals. Like, hey, how are we tracking towards quota? No, that's like not really the thing that's going to get it done. Like you don't have to really be reminded that. It's tracking progress towards precursor goals, right? Bringing data into one-on-ones, monitoring the leading indicators of new hire ramp, right? Not being satisfied with like, yeah, they're going to get to full productivity in month 9, so I'm going to ignore them in the meantime, or I'm just going to pay attention until they get their first deal done, and then I'm going to declare victory there. Have to be paying attention to more leading indicators there. And then of course, for folks who are already out of ramp, that means identifying issues and then fixing them, because that's how we're going to get more of our reps to top performers. Like, hey, like rep A, you have this hitch in your giddy up. Rep B, you have this hitch in your giddy up, and we're going to fix that, right? And then of course, standardizing the success of top performers. So taking what's making your top performers most effective, understanding that, and then standardizing that across the rest of your team. So these are the things that sales managers should be doing in order to drive higher performance. The problem with this is that for the most part, most organizations don't do an amazing job of enabling their managers to do this effectively. And so there's kind of 2 reasons why. One is that manager enablement is often an afterthought. This is changing a little bit as organizations kind of redirect kind of some of their thinking, thanks to the folks like this around manager enablement. But because data-driven sales management is not something that just comes naturally to sales managers. Oftentimes typically they're promoted ICs, and then as we kind of say is like, they don't necessarily come from the math department. They come from the selling department. Like they're great. They're excellent communicators. They have a high bias to action. They're probably a higher performing rep to start out. It's not necessarily something like data analysis is not something that they were kind of imbued with. And then the second big problem is that we don't really do them any favors when it comes to enabling them from a resource standpoint, because we try to get them to use the assets that like are for analysts. And so it's not surprising that typically what ends up happening is managers kind of just spend their time kind of going back to the thing that they're used to, which is deals, right? And so what our claim would be is that what you should be doing is providing managers with all the KPIs they should be, that they need in order to do their job. And then moreover, helping them monitor those things, right? So doing proactive goal track, like automated proactive goal tracking, providing early warning alerting to managers. Hey, this rep's win rate is off, and it's because their conversion rate out of this stage right here is really problematic. Hey, this rep's ASP is a lot higher than it's historically been. That's really fantastic. Why don't you figure out why that is, and we can standardize it across the rest of the team. And then also being able to do automated performance issue diagnosis. And so, not surprisingly, this is kind of the stuff that Atrium really focuses on, where we focus on helping sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve team performance through this specific mechanism right here. Moreover, what Atrium does is Atrium is a tool for sales operations to get leverage, right? To get leverage by empowering those managers and leaders. And so like the joke that we like to say is sales operations needs to get out of the business of unread, unrefreshed dashboards. I remember doing this like when I would make dashboards for people. I really need this dashboard. I really need it immediately. All right, cool. I'm gonna like spend 3 hours putting it together. You come back in 3 weeks and it hasn't been refreshed since the time you made it. You're like, okay, great. And of course, what that means is uninformed managers who like maybe are a little aggravating because like these resources have been made for them. And then oftentimes those folks are kind of showing up in your inbox or in Slack saying like, hey, I need this new thing. Hey, I need this new thing. I already made you that thing a month ago, right? And you didn't look at it. And so these are all very low leverage right here. And so what we do at Atrium here is we partner with sales operations, and like obviously we work with sales managers and sales leaders as well. But sales operations views Atrium as a tool by which to get out of this unleveraged approach here and instead get into a more leveraged state where there's more time for sales operations to be working on higher leverage things, strategic work, for the board, for the CEO, for the C-suite, better processes, et cetera. They can stoke out their managers who can now help themselves and stop blowing you up. And of course, they have much happier leaders who want those managers to be enabled, and rather than having those those managers complaining to them that they're not getting what they need from sales operations. And so this is we do this with hundreds of organizations and partner with sales operations really to help them empower those frontline managers to finally manage by metric in a way that isn't like being in the deals and not doing the analysis for not relying on sales operations to do that interpretation and analysis for those managers, but instead allowing them to do it themselves through assets that they can leverage. And so some examples of customers that we work with to do that is a company called Envoy, who's seen dramatic increases in their levels of customer facing meeting volumes and better pipe hygiene improvement. Customers like Gainsight, who have had similar improvements in pipe hygiene and execution in their enterprise business. So that's a little bit on Atrium. Let's get back to our kind of regularly scheduled program here and talk a little bit about how to enable this. And so the big thing here from a managerial standpoint is the reason why we want to help those managers use data. It's the way of getting them to leverage. So like we're like levering on a lever here, right? So we as sales operations are in the business of levering up the organization. And so what that means is we're going to help them get leverage themselves. And so what that means, so by getting leverage and getting out of anecdata, what does that mean? So if you think about the behaviors that managers will oftentimes do in order to try to improve rep performance, it's very low leverage. Like riding along on calls with their reps is pretty low leverage. Like, are you on the right call? Right? Is this the right rep? Is this the call that needs you, etc. Similarly, like listening to hours of calls is also fairly low leverage. Even if you're listening to it like 1.5x or 2x, like, are you listening to the right call? Right? What's the takeaway from it, etc. Closing deals for your reps is obviously the lowest of the low leverage. As you can see, this is a super rep icon right here. Extremely low leverage. And like these are the behaviors that oftentimes managers engage in. And of course, having a remote sales organization really doesn't help this at all. Recurring deal inspection, so like deals, it's an important thing, but it's not the only thing, right? Like that helps you with deal strategy. Oh, have you thought to include this person right here? Oh, it sounds like this is this situation right here. We should do this. That's like more like playing the game of chess on a play-by-play basis, as my buddy Corey Bray likes to say. You don't coach the play, you coach the player. And so when you're looking at ops, you're kind of like looking at like these plays that are being run. It's okay to say, hey, you know what, that person like right there, like let's go around them. But what we need to do is up level and understand what's happening on a rep by rep basis to coach them up and fix their like kind of the root cause behavior that might be causing a problem across all their deals. And so data, of course, is the right way of doing this, because what you can do there is you can see around corners, and then moreover, it not only helps you identify what the issue is, then when you go and you tackle the issue, right, or the hypothesized issue, with data, you can loop back around again and see, did that fix? So as an example, like let's say we have a rep that's got a win rate problem and it looks like his win rate problem is being driven by, a pipeline hygiene issue. He's got way too many ops in his pipe, because you look at how many ops he has as compared to his peers, it's totally overloaded. His untouched opportunity counts are just bananas. That indicates an overloading and a pipeline hygiene problem. If we go and we fix that and we coach that, and we see those metrics, we see those opportunity ownership metrics normalize into an appropriate band, and we see those untouched opportunity counts go down. What that'll allow us to and we see a commensurate rise in win rate, great. We know that we've solved the problem there, right? So like that allows with data, we can see that we'd actually fix the problem in question, that the behavior has changed in a way that's going to drive better performance. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to talk a little bit about how to facilitate a data-driven operating rhythm in your manager course. And so kind of a crux to infusing data into your sales management motion is making sure that folks have time on the calendar to ensure that it's actually happening, and then moreover making sure that the assets are then tied to those operating rhythm facets. And so, meetings are kind of the most traditional and kind of most effective way of driving an operating rhythm. These would be some examples there. So like pipeline review on a weekly basis, deal strategy meetings. These ones right here are obviously very deal centric. But that's okay. Like, you want to have those on the calendar to do that work, but it's not the only thing. Right? You also want to make sure that there are one-on-ones happening with a manager and a rep, but not focused on deal inspection and pipe inspection, but instead focused on metrics and skills. To the point that we used earlier, that would be the place where we would talk about the fact that this rep has a pipeline hygiene problem, and we would prescribe solutions there, and then come back to it again in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is that your operating rhythm is, and see if that has solved, right? Like, that's not going to happen in a deal strategy review. That's not going to happen in pipeline reviews. Similarly, and then kind of like slower cadence throughput there would be like things like the QBR meeting and call reviews as well. Cool. And so this is what that operating rhythm might look like in practice there. There's a prototypical month that you might have, where Mondays you have your sales team meetings, and you have, stand-ups for your various teams. You might have pipe review on a Wednesday, and you might have stack up all your one-on-ones on one day. So this is just like a prototypical operating rhythm there. And then this is a great example of what a typical structure might look like for a data-driven one-on-one. I think actually, unfortunately, I didn't link to it here, because we actually have a template for this bad boy. Did I link to it? No, I didn't. Bad Pete. And so, one, make sure it's on the calendar to ensure that they actually happen. We have a joke that we say here at Atrium that calendar is destiny. You want to make sure that these things actually happen. You got to put it on the calendar on a recurring basis. And then, having a good structure as delineated by, a good templated working doc. At minimum, make sure that there is a recurring agenda in the meeting invite. And then you could use that if you want, as like a scratch pad. Like, you have topics that you want to bring up, you can put it in the 2 weeks out meeting agenda. The more official, kind of fancier version of that would probably be looking at doing that in a template doc, right? The next thing that you would want to do with respect to managers as a sales, so like, this is setting up an operating rhythm in partnership with your management and leadership to make sure that data is making it into those parts of the operating rhythm, right? So as a sales operator, as a sales operations person, we would help them design this operating rhythm. Like, we know that they ought to have an effective operating rhythm, and we know that there ought to be data assets infused by that. This is how we would help our management team set up those operating rhythm facets, and then make sure that the relevant assets are embedded into that. Similarly, we can do the same thing through goal setting, right? So, and not just like from a quota standpoint, from a booking standpoint, but using that fingerprint of success to say, these are the not just the lagging indicators, but also the leading indicators that we might want to have that we ought to be paying attention to on a weekly and monthly basis, such that we're not surprised as we pace to or don't pace to our ultimate goal of, in the case of AEs, bookings on a quarterly basis, or in the case of SDR, maybe it's opportunity creation on a quarterly or maybe on a monthly basis. And so setting those goals and then systematizing them is an example of a great way for sales operations to empower those frontline managers by providing an asset, so a goal harness, a metrics harness, a goal harness, which then the managers use to hold their those reps accountable to, right? So sales operations, like once that is built and provided, sales operations is not in the business of monitoring it. That's the responsibility of the managers, but the managers themselves are not necessarily going to derive those, like which goals should I be setting, which goals should we be what metrics should we be setting goals on? What are the appropriate levels of those goals? What is the appropriate time periods on those goals? Those are all things that sales operations and leadership can use to provide this to sales managers, who then can use those on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to better manage those reps, and drive the appropriate success. So this is an example of another, Zelda sword, if you will, that we want to give our managers. Okay, cool. So how do we actually do that? Well, what we want to do is we want to set goals appropriately there. We want to use there's a couple different ways we can do that. We can use historical performance by our kind of like upper middle reps to inform reasonable goals. So we can look at historical performance there. We can also look at, we can kind of go bottoms up and use a model to inform expected levels of activity there. And then also we can use benchmarks. This is something that's a little harder for organizations to do that don't have access to other data. This is one of the things that we're kind of blessed with here at Atrium, because we have hundreds and hundreds of customers. Our customer success team can easily help organizations benchmark across other anonymously across other organizations that kind of look similar to them. This is different, of course, than by looking at historical performance, which is extremely easy. Like once you turn on an Atrium account, you just look at the historical performance of all the reps that are on your team right now and reps who have previously been there, to get a sense of where things have been historically for a variety of metrics. That said, if you want to look at kind of examples of benchmarks there, these are some examples of suggested AE goals here. Customer facing meeting volume anywhere between 7 to 15 per week. If you want to get down to the level of granularity of customer facing email volume, I'm actually a fan of this. A lot of some people are like, oh man, that's too granular. I don't know, AEs should be hustling, right? As SDRs are hustling, AEs should be as well. We do a lot of our selling asynchronously via email, so it should probably be showing up in there as well. Maybe just do opt touches instead. But these are some examples there. Obviously, as you get up into bookings and pipeline ownership, it's going to start spreading out a little bit more. But the metrics focused around things that you might are reliant on how many hours there are in the week, it should be probably pretty consistent. And these are some examples here with SDRs as well. So then the last section here we're going to talk about is metrics for the reps that make up the organization, right? And there are a couple situations in which sales operations and sales leaders might actually want to get down to the individual rep level. And so this kind of sounds like it might be a little bit lower leverage, because this might be a little bit lower leverage because it sounds like, well, wait a minute, Pete, you just said that we should be enabling managers, we should be enabling, giving them leverage, et cetera. How the heck can I pay attention to, a bajillion reps? And then the response to that is well, what we can do is there are certain really high criticality times when backing them up can really matter, right? When backing up your managers can really matter. And so examples of that would be in ramping, right? Because ramp is a super, super, super important part, like a super critical time in a rep's tenure in an organization. It might be around things like key initiatives. Like you might have a very, very specific initiative. We see this a lot with Atrium. Organizations will start working with Atrium and say, hey man, we got to get our pipe hygiene game tight. Or, hey, you know what? Like we just reduced the size of the SDR team by 50%. Our AEs have got to have really got to get on the prospecting game, right? So we have a key initiative around AE pipe gen. Okay, great. But these are examples where you would enable managers to be able to measure this themselves, but you would probably back them up as well. So let's kind of go through some of these examples here. So ramping, making sure that our reps are ramping successfully is obviously extraordinarily important. Traditional kind of analytics solutions really make it tough to see how folks are ramping because they don't allow you to baseline everybody at the same start date. This is actually something we built in Atrium to make it very, very easy for folks to be able to baseline everybody to the same start date. And like you can kind of see it right here. So this is bookings, obviously, but like from an opportunity ownership standpoint, you can see that there's a couple reps here who are a little bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to ramping, right? You can see everybody else's prior ramps here. These guys look like they're about like 2 or 3 months lag there. Yep, see that little delta right there? And so that's something that we would want to identify, right? And be able to like seek to fix. Want to redirect, like we want to, the whole purpose of all this data-driven management is we want to change, we want to see something, and then intervene to change behavior. Similar version of that would be alerting on these sort of things. So making sure that folks, it's one thing to use our eyes to try to bird dog these things, but being able to statistically be alerted to the fact that someone is way behind all their peers with respect to opportunity ownership. This is something that a manager or a sales leader or a sales operations person who's helping that manager back check their team, like this would make this hair on the back of your neck stick up. Like this rep is 32% behind the typical ramping employee with respect to op ownership. That has probably pretty substantial implications for eventual, like what eventually would be their bookings outputs, right? Or conversely, you could say, hey, like this person's new opportunity inflow is way ahead of everybody else. That's fantastic. Is there a new signifier of success here? Right? Like, is this like, did this person figure out something new that we can standardize for the future there and make everybody's ramp better? And then of course you can do the same thing with like more lagging indicators as well. Like, hey, this person's like closing way more deals than their peers. That's awesome. Figure out why, make it such that everybody does this. Oh, looks like it's because their win rate is a lot higher. Why is that? What are they doing differently? Let's go ahead and apply that to everybody else. And then the same is true with like, so that's ramping. And then key initiatives like, hey, look, we said that we want to make sure that our AEs are prospecting more, right? Because, we reduced marketing budgets. AEs got to row the boat themselves. Great. Is that happening? Oh, look, it is. Way more prospecting emails are being sent. Or, hey, you know what? No more of this like unloved pipeline situation. We got to be on top of our ops, or like, we're going to take them away from you. Oh, look at that. We've got a special initiative around making sure that like we're managing our pipe way more effectively. And look at those untouched opportunity counts go down, 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 down. And these are kind of examples from some Atrium customers where as soon as they start measuring and managing from measurement specific KPIs as related to a specific initiative, lo and behold, behavior changes and good outcomes start happening, whether it's pipeline hygiene or like, AE prospecting or, customer facing meeting volumes or, kind of like quality behaviors, all those sort of things. Like if you measure it, you can manage it. And so then you can improve it. And then the last thing here is like what we like to call kind of key root cause analysis. This is something that's like unique to Atrium, where Atrium will monitor a variety of different metrics in order to tell you where a rep is, like what the root cause of a rep's underperformance or outperformance is. And so this is the sort of thing that oftentimes can be challenging for managers to just do on their own. This is why Atrium just does it for them. But also this is an example of something that a sales operations person or leader might want to backstop, right? And like have like bird dog these specific high criticality insights such that they can say, hey, Mr. Bob Manager, did you notice, and you probably noticed this already, but one of your reps seems like he's pacing behind with respect to bookings, and it looks like it's being driven as a result of his lower win rate. Oh man, I hadn't seen that. Thank you. I really appreciate you backstopping me there, Mr. Sales Operations person, Ms. Sales Operations person. Right. Cool. So I think we covered a lot of content here, but I think the upshot here that I kind of want to like leave people with is that as sales operations folks, like we really are in the empowerment business and of our managers and our leaders as a mechanism by which to get leverage for the business. Right. So hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. If you want to get your own sales nerd hoodie, because all of us revenue operators are big sales nerds, we're going to go ahead and drop that link here again. And just go ahead and sign up for that. Again, all we ask in exchange is a short chat on how you use data in your business right now. So hi, Elliot.
Hi, Pete. Thank
Hello.
you. That was wonderful. Yeah. Going to wrap things up now. Of course, want to thank everyone for attending. It's always a pleasure having you guys here. Big shout out to our sponsor of today's event, Atrium. Make sure to check them out. Link to their website is in the chat alongside the goodies. Big thank you to Pete and Pete for providing the content. Recordings and key takeaways will be available on our page shortly. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Elliot. See ya.